Hello everybody and welcome back to a brand new video where I'm giving you guys my, I guess you'd call it, immediate reaction to episode 6 of series 12 of Doctor Who in Praxeus. So yes, before I get into the video proper, this episode kinda has a special significance to me because it is, for the first time in my life, it is an episode of Doctor Who that has aired on my birthday, because it's my birthday today, so it's quite exciting. Well, I guess it has been quite exciting today to have a Doctor Who episode to look forward to on my birthday for the very first time. So that was quite nice. But anyway, let's get into the episode itself. So yes, this episode, I feel like it's, after last week's, it was always going to be hard to live up to the kind of shock value of what we saw in last week's episode. We found out ultimately this episode had nothing arc related in it. It wasn't progressing any storylines or plotlines at all. It was very much a one-off self-contained episode, apart from the lead-in from the previous story, but it doesn't really matter. You didn't really need to see that for it to be relevant in this story. This is very much a one-off episode. And, like, I personally reasonably enjoyed this episode. Like, I don't think that it's anything groundbreaking or different or particularly special for any particular reason, but it does feel like a very solid, good episode of Doctor Who with a great scale, quite exciting, quite action-packed, quite fast-paced, certainly through the first half of the episode. There is moments where I'm sure people will moan about the preachiness of this episode, about plastics and blah, blah, blah. It wasn't like Orphan 55. I'm not going to try and deny that Orphan 55 was preachy at the end, but apart from the Doctor briefly in the middle of the episode mentioning about the problems of plastics and how we're polluting the environment, which is factually accurate, I don't feel like it was too heavy or trying to say all humans are terrible for not sort of sorting out plastics in the world and stuff like that. For me, it didn't strike me as, oh, this is so preachy and political. But I'm sure for some people it will, and that's kind of a bit of a shame. In terms of the episode, I really, really enjoyed the way that it was split off into three different places, as we saw in Peru, in Madagascar, and in Hong Kong. I felt that probably, quite possibly, this episode was the best use of all of the companions and the Doctor in one episode that we've seen in potentially the whole Jodie Whittaker / Chris Chibnall era. Like, I cannot remember another episode where every single companion actually got a decent amount of stuff to do, was involved directly in the plot as we were going through it all throughout the whole episode. And it just felt like that was really worked quite effectively this time. It felt like splitting off the Doctor and Yaz and Graham and Ryan into three separate sort of factions, or separate people to go and investigate these different things. I felt worked really, really effectively for the plot, particularly in the first half of this episode, when it felt like it was really fast-paced, going back and forth between all the different locations, or suddenly trying to really quickly transfer across all these different locations to try and meet when stuff was changing and finding out new things. And it felt like quite a good sort of problem solver episode almost, where like you're kind of spending the whole episode trying to work out quite what's going on, what is the connection of all these things. We're sort of almost following along with the Doctor in terms of her, as she's trying to work it out, we're trying to follow with that as well. And I think that does work reasonably effectively as a sort of a plot device to take us through this episode. I don't think it's perfect by any means. I don't think it's groundbreaking, as I said, by any means. I think it's a little bit of a shame to not really have a proper alien race, ultimately, in this story. That it was just a generic humanoid race who weren't necessarily villains as such. I quite like the twist that girl, I can't remember her name, but that girl from Madagascar was actually part of this alien race that had come to Earth to try and find out why this Praxeus virus that was killing all of them is finding an antidote for it. I thought that was quite a clever misdirection, and then sort of turning it on its head to find out that actually there aren't just evil aliens behind this, that it actually was, that it's a race of aliens that just want to save themselves, which is obviously fairly selfish, but and deadly to the planet. But I did feel like it just gave something a little bit different to just, there's generic aliens infecting the whole world to try and kill them to take over the Earth. Like, it felt like they at least did something a little bit different to that, which I quite like. But as I say, I felt it was a little bit of a shame that this episode didn't really feature any proper visually appealing aliens, shall we say. And I couldn't help, to some extent, get out of my head I knew it was ridiculous, really, but the rumour from months ago that this episode was going to have something to do with the Sea Devils, it was just in the back of my mind through this episode. I was kind of hoping more than expecting we might see them. We didn't, obviously, and it's not a shame. It wouldn't have fit with the plot anyway, but it did kind of fit with the rumours we originally heard about something in an episode to do with plastics and things like that, which I know got people moaning at the time, and will probably get people moaning again, which is a shame. But yeah, as I say, I was kind of a little bit hoping the Sea Devils might turn up, but it didn't quite happen in the end. In terms of the guest cast, I felt that they all performed pretty well across the board. There wasn't any outstanding or particularly amazing guest performances. I quite like the subplot between the two gay guys of Jake and I think it was Alex or something. I can't remember the astronaut's name, I'm really sorry. But between those two, I felt that was quite well represented through the episode, with obviously seeing the guy essentially flying to his death right towards the end. Unfortunately, nearly bringing in the kill the gays trope that we see, that is a very unfortunately overused, I mean, that's not necessarily intentionally overused trope of gay characters so often get introduced and then killed off in episodes, not Doctor Who, just in TV generally. So in many ways it was quite nice to see that kind of broken as a trope, but also to see the Doctor kind of saving a person at the last second before they died. I thought that was a very Doctor-y thing to do that we don't always necessarily see. Sometimes you kind of just accept they've died. But on this occasion, she was actually able to use her skills and the TARDIS and everything to be able to save him at the very, very last moment. So I thought that was quite a nice kind of happy ending to have, really, after we'd seen quite a few people killed in what was, I think, a really, really effectively brutal way. That we have this virus called Praxeus that infects people, kind of covers them over with this weird white stuff, and then they just disintegrate into nothingness. I thought that was pretty well, it was very well realised on screen, I think, and really kind of packed a punch that suddenly they're infected, it shoots up their body, and boom, they're gone. They're disintegrated into nothingness. I thought that was really cool. That was really effectively, visually done really, really effectively, and I felt really just built up the threat that this is actually a really deadly virus. It's not just one that, gradually over time kills you. I know with the astronaut, it kind of took a little bit long, but generally we saw these other people, like the naval guy at the start of the episode, and the other person in Peru, that they just went and died, and I thought that went really well. Personally, I didn't mind the idea about it being that they were feeding on plastics and using plastic to, well, ultimately the whole point was that they wanted to, it was sort of the virus was infecting things with plastic in, essentially. I think that's what I got it right. There was a little bit much of sort of info dump exposition, lots of buzzwords, and not necessarily explaining them that well. There was a lot of kind of, I felt right in the middle of the story when they were in the lab, there were a lot of very heavy dialogue scenes with the Doctor and a couple of other characters, but where essentially the Doctor was kind of using loads of buzzwords to try and explain everything that's happening. And occasionally Graham or Ryan were trying to kind of get her to be more simple about it, but it didn't feel like it always worked that well. So I feel like I'm going to have a rewatch to kind of fully understand exactly what's happening. But I know there's a virus they essentially accidentally invented on whatever alien world they're from that we don't even know, that called Praxeus, that infected this race, and then they came to Earth to try and experiment, basically, to try and solve it, and weren't doing a very good job of it, was essentially the plot, I think. But yeah, there was a little bit too much expository dialogue has been a problem throughout the Chris Chibnall era. I mean, it's just a common problem, unfortunately, which doesn't seem to ever be getting fixed. I am intrigued what Chris Chibnall actually did in this episode, because I thought the reason Chris Chibnall co-wrote it was because it was going to have something arc-related, but it didn't. So, well, I mean, Stephen Moffat did co-write some episodes that had nothing particularly archy in them. It did just happen sometimes with showrunners, maybe when they just need to step in to kind of help the script that was struggling a little bit sometimes, maybe, and just edit it a little bit, or edit it enough that it's worthy of having given them a credit. I don't know. But it was just, I thought, intriguing that he got a credit, but it wasn't anything obvious that he would have been involved in with this episode. Ultimately, I think it was a pretty enjoyable and entertaining, nearly an hour long of television, where I felt through certainly the first half, it was really fast-paced and action-packed and exciting. And I really, really liked that. It felt very intriguing and mysterious, and I was like, what's going to happen next? Where are we going to go? What's the next development in what they're all trying to understand? Spread of the Companions worked excellently, I thought, in most of this story. They really felt like they had things to do. It felt like both Ryan and Yaz in particular got their moments. Graham, maybe not quite as much, but it felt like, yeah, Ryan and Yaz in particular really got a good sort of amount to work with in this episode, which I was really, really pleased to see. Maybe it slowed down a little bit in the middle, and there was a few sort of quieter scenes and stuff, and I don't know, it felt like it started better than it ended as an episode, I think. And I do quite like the twist, but it also meant it was maybe a touch underwhelming, the ending. There wasn't some evil alien villain behind it ultimately, which is what really we like to see in Doctor Who, don't we? So yes, overall it was a solid episode of Doctor Who. It's certainly not down at Orphan 55 levels of terrible, but it's not up with some of the very best episodes. It's kind of somewhere in the middle of sort of 6, 7 out of 10. It's pretty good. I'm not convinced it's going to improve with the rewatch, because I feel like what's interesting about this episode is that you don't know what's going to happen and trying to figure out the mystery, and once that's taken away, I don't really know what it has left to offer particularly. But yeah, so that's my review of my initial thoughts we say on this episode. I might give it another watch and maybe do some more in-depth thoughts on it. I'll kind of see how I feel, really, whether I've got anything else worth saying after having watched it again. But I would love to hear from you guys down in the comments below what you thought of it. Did you love it? Did you hate it? Do you think it was actually a really good episode, or the worst thing the show's ever done? I would love to hear what you have to say down in the comments below. But apart from that, as always, hit that like button, that subscribe button, and I'll see you again very soon for another one. Goodbye!